Unitarian Society of Germantown. My name is Judy Rhodes, and my pronouns are she, her. Before we go any further, I'd like to say how happy we all are that Reverend Hannah is back. We are a Unitarian Universalist congregation united in a common purpose to make love real in our lives and in the world. We are diverse in our beliefs, atheist and agnostic, believers and seekers, and we welcome you here no matter your race, your class, your gender identity, your sexual orientation, your family structure, your job, your health. No matter our differences, we know that we are all part of the independent web of life. Whether this is your first, 5th, or 15th visit, we invite you to introduce yourself to someone at the welcome table, and they would be happy to answer any questions you have about our congregation or Unitarian Universalism. Please complete a visitor card and join us for fellowship at coffee hour in the dining room, right back there. Our fellowship hour this week is potluck, and we are welcoming back Reverend Hannah. So it is truly a community offering, all the flavors. Gender neutral restrooms can be found at the back of the stairs, in the back of the sanctuary, and gendered restrooms are through the door and down the hall. Use whichever feels right for you. For announcements today, you are invited to learn more about Unitarian Universalism at 12 noon today. Charles Gabriel will lead this informative session in the second floor children's library, just beyond the elevator. Next Sunday, after the service, visitors are invited to meet and greet with Reverend Hannah and the welcome table. We are there to greet you. Please come and chat and snacks and find out more about Unitarian Universalism. And yes, there was the word snack in there. And of course, tomorrow is one of the most joyful, fun, feel-good days we have at USG. In light of the snow prediction, we will let you know by 4 o'clock today via website or email whether we will need to reschedule the day. Our MLK Day of Service is truly a meaningful and impactful day. You can lift your spirit and the spirits of others at the same time. If we have the day, doors will open at registration 8 o'clock in the morning. A brief non-denominational worship service is at 9 o'clock, and then at 9:30 we begin our many projects. We hope to see all of you there if the day goes along as planned. And now, as we deepen into worship, I ask that you silence your cell phones and allow yourself to be present for this hour, but please don't silence your children. Their words are welcome here.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's so good to see all of your faces. For those of you who don't know me, I am Reverend Hannah Capaldi. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve this congregation as your minister. It is good to be together again. I have missed so many of you. I've missed all of you. I've missed all of you. I'm going to allow myself to abuse the pulpit for 1 second, which is, does anyone who lives near the church have a sled I can borrow for my kid tomorrow? Kate, do you? Yeah, okay. If you have an extra sled in your basement, no one has a sled, and this is my first Sunday back, and I thought I'd just ride that. Dr. King said, "Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. Let us come into this space we make sacred with our presence and our intention, and remember together the power we have and the power we can build. Fueled by the love we create and find and know that we use to correct all that stands against love. Today, tomorrow, and always. Come, let us worship. Please stand in body or spirit for hymn number 162, Gonna Lay Down My Sword and Shield. Oh! Let's light it.
And please join me in the unison words printed in your order of service. We light this chalice, the beacon that calls us to love, to justice, to a deepening of spirit. And now, will you join me in body or spirit, rising, and hymn number 162, Gonna Lay Down My Sword and Shield.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Zoe Johnston. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Director of Spiritual Development here, which means this is our time for all ages. So if all of our kids, our young ones, our young at heart people want to join me, Kylam, I see you in the aisle. Do you want to join me down at the front? This is our time for all the kids. To join us. Young at heart. You can drive it, I know. And June's here. We have a long walk from the wiggle room up to the front, so we give people time. Hi, Justice. How are you all this morning? Doing good? some haircuts happened. Yeah. Hello. So today I'm going to tell you a story that Jesus once told to help people understand what it means to love their neighbors. So one day, a traveler was walking along a lonely road from Jerusalem to Jericho. These were two different cities, when he was attacked by robbers. These robbers took his money, his clothes, and hurt him very badly. The traveler thought he might die on the side of the road. But then he saw a priest coming towards him. The traveler felt sure that this priest would help, but instead the priest crossed to the other side of the road and hurried by, afraid that he too would be attacked by robbers. How do you think that would feel? Disgusting? Yeah, bad. So I see some thumbs down. I see it. Hours passed and the traveler was still hurting. Again, he saw someone coming towards him. This man was a Levite, a temple official. Surely he would help. But again, this temple official ignored the traveler, crossed to the other side of the road, and hurried on by. So this was two people that walked by. The next one's got to help. Let's hope so. Time went by, and the traveler grew steadily weaker. He was thirsty and hungry. He thought perhaps he would be left on the road to die. Then he saw yet another figure walking towards him. Would this man help? But the traveler wasn't sure. Even with our storytelling principles, as Sabrina said, this man was from a country called Samaria, and the Samaritans were enemies of his people. If a priest and a Levite hadn't helped him, his own people, the Samaritan would surely refuse to help at all. But to his surprise, the Samaritan stopped, gave him a drink of water, and helped him up. The Samaritan bandaged his wounds, placed him on a donkey, and took him to the nearby town. He paid for a doctor to come and care for the traveler's wounds and provided money for his stay at an inn. The Samaritan promised to come back in a few days and pay whatever was needed to bring the man back to health. So when Jesus finished telling this story, the moral of the story was that the person who acted the most like a neighbor to the traveler was the Samaritan that showed him kindness, even though they were from enemy countries. Have you ever been in a situation where you have to show kindness to somebody that's different than you? Yeah. Was that hard? No, it wasn't hard. So I think it's interesting that you're all saying that it's not hard to show kindness to others. So the story teaches us that despite our differences, we should be kind. But one thing I want to add to you all is that the priest and the Levite were probably scared. They knew that the traveler on the side of the road had suffered from violence and didn't want the same to happen to them. Have you ever been in a situation where you're scared? Scared about what might happen if you speak up? You're not scared of the dark. I'm proud of you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that's the thing. There are things that can help us be brave. So in their fear, the priest and the Levite, they continued the violence of the robbers by refusing to even notice the man on the side of the road, much less help him. I'm going to finish this piece. Violence takes many forms, but it's not always physical. It's possible to speak to each other violently or to refuse help out of violence, or even to support violence with our silence. So I want you all to be kind, but it seems like you're already doing a great job of that. But I also want you to be brave. I want you to find the things that make you feel brave. Because when we see violence, it makes sense to be scared, and it's hard to speak out against violence, and even harder to work for peace, especially when we're scared. Our community is easy to feel brave with. Because as UUs, we are justice-seeking people, and just like the Good Samaritan, we must sometimes take risks to continue loving one another and creating peace in our world. So, this week on MLK Day, And otherwise, we are going to be kind, but we're also going to be brave, because creating peace takes bravery. So, we're going to head out. We're going to be in our classes. We're going to build community, which helps us feel strong and brave. And then we're going to keep doing this work, even outside of Sundays. You don't like songs? Well, we're going to sing the kids out for those that do like songs. And we're going to gather in our classes. June likes songs. There are some of them. And so parents can pick up their kids in their classrooms after service. We'll be behind the elevator and in Sullivan. And we'll see you all afterwards.
Congregationalist, a more liberal of the Protestant denominations. In Kalamazoo, Michigan, I went to Sunday school, sang in the choir, attended many church events. A fond memory was the annual Christmas pageant. We dressed as angels, and one year I even got to sing a solo line. Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy. And then I went to Michigan State University. It was the 60s. I started questioning my beliefs. Much to my father's chagrin, I wasn't sure if there was a true religion or even a God. Fast forward, after raising 3 children, some of these years in Pebble Hill Church in Doylestown, I began to wonder, where do I go now? My husband Rick and I decided to try out USG about 15 years ago. We were looking for a spiritual home. What was this Unitarian Universalism all about anyway? We sat quietly in the back, not wanting to be noticed, for about a year. I had always found the music and choir to be spiritually moving, so I suggested, let's try the choir. With the encouragement of one of our USG members, we went to the first rehearsal. There we practiced songs in Hebrew, Latin, and Spanish. I stayed with the choir despite the challenge. I knew that I was becoming part of a diverse community, and friendships came from that. My participation with a small group ministry connects me with friends where we share responses to themes and questions regarding our lives and spirit. Our Sunday services always provide inspiration. The connection with people, sharing common values, that's what's at the heart of USG, and that is why I keep coming back each Sunday. This week, Sunday, we will share the plate with our annual MLK Day of Service. Thanks to the tireless volunteer efforts of Sarah Lindmont and her crew, we will be engaging with 27 service projects, supporting the different organizations. The food, the art supplies, the toiletries, the time and care and effort all require financial support from you and the USG community. Now in its 28th year, the MLK Day of Service is a beloved tradition here. Please give generously, as we have found that the more we give away, the more comes our way. To give in cash or check, please drop it in the plate as the ushers pass by. To give by text, please follow the instructions on the back cover of your service.
I invite you to settle into a posture of prayer or meditation. Find your feet firmly on the floor. Feel the weight of yourself. Take a deep breath in. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw relax. Exhale fully. Inhale deeply. Exhale fully. Become present to the moment. Feel your heart beating in your chest. Hear the hum of the heaters, the creak of the pews. Find a stillness in yourself. Deep breath in, deep breath out. This morning's prayer is drawn from several prayers Dr. King offered over the course of his ministry. Oh God, we thank you for the fact that you have inspired people in all nations and in all cultures. We call you different names. Some call you Allah, some call you Elohim, some call you Jehovah, some call you Brahma, some call you the unmoved mover. But we know that these are all names for one and the same God. God, grant us that we wage the struggle with dignity and discipline. May all who suffer oppression in this world reject the self-defeating method of retaliatory violence and choose the method that seeks to redeem. Help us, God, in the moment of difficult decision. Help us to work with renewed vigor for a warless world, a better distribution of wealth, and a brotherhood, a sisterhood that transcends race or color. And we ask you, God, in these days of emotional tension, when the problems of our world are gigantic in extent and chaotic in detail, we ask you, God, to be with us in our going out and in our coming in our rising up and in our lying down, in our moments of joy and in our moments of sorrow, until the day when there shall be no sunset and no dawn. Amen.
At this time, we invite you to contribute your joys and sorrows to the bowls of the water in front of the sanctuary. Choose a smooth stone or a pebble and place it in the water to absorb your pain or ripple out your joy. Sterns will play as we process. place a pebble for Deb Kish Silver as she recovers from foot surgery. We pray for restorative healing. Reverend Hannah will place a pebble for Eileen Whalen, who has been experiencing ongoing health issues since the fall in August. While she recovers this week from a virus, we lift her husband, Jerry, in his role as loving caregiver. Finally, Reverend Hannah will place one smooth stone and one pebble into the water on behalf of all those joining us online. Please remain seated and join in the singing hymn of number 123 in the hardback hymnal, Spirit of Life, after which we will share a moment of silence.
I want to invite us now to hear Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King in his own words. So often we lose sight of the fact that he was a preacher and his words were meant to be heard. So I invite you now to settle in as we listen to a clip from his 1967 presentation, sermon, speech at the Riverside Church in New York called Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence.
It is with such activity in mind that the words of the late John F. Kennedy come back to haunt us. 5 years ago, he said, "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable." Increasingly by choice or by accident, this is the role our nation a person-oriented society, when machines and computers, profit motives and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. A true revolution of values will soon cause us to question the fairness and justice of many of our past and present policies. On the one hand, we are called to play the Good Samaritan on life's roadside. That would be only an initial act. One day we must come to see that the whole Jericho road must be transformed, so the men and women will not be constantly beaten and robbed as they make their journey on life's highway. True compassion is more than clinging or calling to a beggar. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. The revolution of values will soon look uneasily on the glaring contrast of poverty and wealth. With righteous indignation, it will look across the seas and see individual capitalists of the West investing huge sums of money in Asia, Africa, and South America, only to take the profits out with no concern for the social betterment of the countries and say this is not just. It will look at our alliance with the landed gentry of South America and say this is not just. Western arrogance of feeling that it has everything to teach others and nothing to learn from them is not just. A true revolution of values will lay hand on the world order and say of war, this where sudden indifference is not just. This business of burning human beings with napalm, filling our nation's homes with orphans and widows, of injecting poisonous drugs of hate into the veins of peoples normally human, sending men home from dark and bloody battlefields, physically handicapped and psychologically deranged, and not being reconciled with wisdom, justice, and love. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense and on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. To prevent us from reordering our priorities so that the pursuit of peace will take precedence over the pursuit of war. There's nothing to keep us from molding a recalcitrant status quo with bruised hands until we have fashioned it into a brotherhood.
America is a gun. England is a cup of tea. France, a wheel of ripened brie. Greece, a short, squat olive tree. America is a gun. Brazil is football on the sand. Argentina, Maradona's hand. Germany, an oompa band. America is a gun. Holland is a wooden shoe. Hungary, a goulash stew. Australia, a kangaroo. America is a gun. Japan is a thermal spring. Scotland is a Highland fling. Oh, better to be anything than America is a gun. By Brian Bilston.
It was a hot summer day. I was about 7 or 8, and I looked across the road at a gaggle of neighborhood children playing with water guns. I knew what they were from their neon colorways and the endless barrage of ads on Nickelodeon that insisted the most fun I would ever have in the sun would come from pumping a chamber full of water and pulling the trigger on my friends. I begged my dad for a super soaker. Please, please, can we get one? Time and again, the answer was stern and the same. In our family, guns are not toys. I resented this rule for a long time, but the clarity of it, the simplicity of it, it helped me as a child, and then as a teen and as a young adult, approach our country's gun culture rooted in a value I could bounce off of, that I could push and pull against. I first picked up a gun when I was 21 years old, going to a shooting range with Livia in college in rural Ohio just to see what all the fuss was about. It was heavy, and I felt the weight of its deadliness almost immediately. I was so scared I could barely hold it straight to shoot. I came to feel a little surprised, shocked even, at the casual way my friends and my country mixed guns with fun. Laser tag, Grand Theft Auto, airsoft. I came to feel, and still do, that we are surrounded, super soaked, in invitations to confuse violence with entertainment. For those of us in the burbs, people raised with options and abounding opportunities, college a non-negotiable, working jobs in high school for pocket money, the confusion of violence with entertainment is without a doubt a privilege. The Inquirer tells us daily of 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds running around with guns, cerebellums hardly formed, killing one another over nothing. There are children in this world, in this country, in this city, mere blocks away, who are never afforded their right to be insulated from violence, who are not deemed precious enough to protect by politicians, by city budgets, by us, their neighbors. Here in this community, we sing our children to their classes with the words, "Go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you." And perhaps we sing it as a prayer, a hope, winging through the air to rest and surround the children of USG, but also all children, everywhere, that they might never confuse violence with entertainment, guns as toys. That they are held and protected from the harsh and unyielding reality of what guns were made for, and that all children might benefit from the revolution of values we espouse here, inspired by the very words of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. I don't think that violence is natural. I don't think that we have an inherent desire to inflict bodily harm on one another. I don't believe that we are born wanting to draw blood. Reverend Hannah, how do you know this to be true, you say? How many of us have winced at the movies? Really, how many of you wince on television? At the casual way we watch people slash throats and machine gun their way into victory, that wincing to me, that wincing is such a precious human response. It's such a valuable spiritual indication of that which can be corrupted, that which can be hardened, that which should be protected at all costs, shielded from overexposure, from overwhelm, lest we tarnish our natural instinct to see violence not as a game, not as entertainment, but as the ultimate loss of integrity, as unnatural. America is a gun. Not a teapot, not an olive tree, not a thermal spring, but a gun, says poet Brian Bilston. Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that great, strong land of love, where never kings connive nor tyrants scheme, that any man be crushed by one above. These are the words of Langston Hughes, with a sarcastic smirk coursing through his verses. It never was America to me, he says. We are a country founded on violence, funded by violence. What would it mean for our national bird to be a dove rather than an eagle? It would require a complete and total revolution of values. As I've grown older and matured, I've come to see that the simplicity of guns are not toys falls short of explaining why guns exist at all. I've come to see that my belief in violence as unnatural doesn't adequately express my feelings that it can also be justified. I believe it is my Unitarian Universalism which has informed some of this maturity, this spiritual curiosity as to how and why violence exists, and what do I make of it when pressed up against my values. I came of age in the shadow of 9/11, Columbine, Abu Ghraib. I've seen violence wielded again and again by people in power as justifiable for some, but not all. Allowed by some, but not everyone. I was 13 the first time I heard one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. Too often, the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King is simplified in order to make it fit neatly into the narrative of nonviolence good, violence bad. Too often, his "I Have a Dream" speech is the one we know rather than Beyond Vietnam, which we just heard a clip from. Too often, we see him in opposition to Malcolm X rather than in solidarity with. But the wisdom of Dr. King is cheapened, the learnings cut short, if we don't see that he, too, wrestled with questions of complexity in his years as a leader. That he, too, came to espouse a far more complicated and nuanced understanding of violence, how it had a time and a place, a cause and a justification, a utility and an impetus, that it was not simply good or bad, but rather a symptom of a much larger malady, a spiritual one. That violence does not exist in a vacuum, but is rather learned and invigorated by the presence of other violence. Dr. King once said, "As I have walked among the desperate, rejected, and angry young men, I have told them that Molotov cocktails and rifles would not solve their problems. I have tried to offer them my deepest compassion while maintaining my conviction that social change comes most meaningfully through nonviolent action. But they ask, and rightly so, what about Vietnam? They ask as if our own nation wasn't using massive doses of violence to solve its problems, to bring about the change it wanted. Their questions hit home, and I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government. I too have struggled with this conflict, how to condemn violence while also understanding it, that there is power and dignity in Nat Turner's rebellion, that there is justifiable murderous rage among Palestinians, that the Viet Cong were fighting for their freedom from conniving kings and scheming tyrants, for the ability to determine their own lives, just like the Afghans, the Algerians, the Armenians. that it is difficult to look the children of Germantown in the eye and tell them not to pick up a gun when I cannot offer them a path to a life of more than mere survival, that my tax dollars have been spent on Lockheed Martin and SpaceX and Blackwater, and by the time the tax man got around to the schools, all the money had been spent up. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death, warned Dr. King. And we have been hurtling towards spiritual death since the inception of the military-industrial complex in 1961. Some days I awake and think that spiritual death has already come and gone for us. But what I know about saving our spirits, what I know about saving our souls from death and destruction, is that it starts with love. Dr. King said, "When I speak of love, I am not speaking of some sentimental and weak response. I am not speaking of that force which is just emotional bosh. I am speaking of that force which all the great religions have seen as the supreme unifying principle of life. Love is somehow the key that unlocks the door which leads to ultimate reality. In love, we find compassion. We find empathy. And Dr. King believed it was in empathy and in compassion that we root our nonviolence, that we root our ability to see our enemies not as subhuman, not as unworthy of life, but rather as our teachers, teachers of our own weaknesses, our own shortcomings. On the eve of the presidential inauguration, I fear that I too have succumbed to a kind of thinking that sees us versus them all too often. That has cast out the loyalists and the red states as enemies rather than as teachers. To continue with this line of thinking would only contribute more to the violent cycle, dragging us down the long, dark, and shameful corridor of time reserved for those who possess power without compassion, might without morality, strength without sight, to quote Dr. King. To continue with this line of thinking would be all too in line with our current cultural values, finding solace in dark fantasies of civil war, finding purpose in being the world's police, finding entertainment in long hours of first-person shooter games. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called to do the harder thing, to the revolution of values espoused by Dr. King, the countercultural thing, to seek empathy and understanding while rooting down deep in nonviolence and compassion, to center people, to center relations, to center love. I have often spoken to you of my day-to-day relationship with God. I feel the same way about violence sometimes. Some days I wake up and believe in its power to make real change. Some days I wake up and feel more questions than answers. Some days I wake up and know beyond a shadow of a doubt that violence only begets more violence. All can be true. None of it is simple. And we cheapen our learning, undermine our efforts to experience ultimate reality when we avoid complexity, when we deny Dr. King his due as a man with all the same questions as us. This summer, I got to be that in-law, as I politely declined the distribution of water guns to our kid, just 3 years old, knowing that I too would be raising my children to know without reservation that in our family, guns are not toys. It feels both at once an enormous claim to stake and somehow hardly holding the line. but perhaps it is a prayer for my children and all the world's children, that we one day might know peace, true peace. May our country experience a revolution in values. May we seek to place people, not profits, at the center. May we hold fast to flinching in the face of violence. And may our souls be saved from spiritual death. May it be so, and amen. I invite you to rise in body or spirit to sing together our third congregational hymn, number 159, "This Is My Song."
And now we will extinguish our chalice. As we extinguish our chalice, please join me in unison with the words printed in your order of service, followed by our sung response. This chalice remains within us.
Beloveds, the times are hard, and they may be getting harder. But know here, you are loved. Our relationships, the love that exists between us, is what will keep despair at bay, what will keep hope alive. We here will continue to march and pray and sing for a revolution of values in this country. In in this world. May our souls be saved. May we experience a new world one day, where our children are safe and violence but a dream. May it be so.